In the first half of 2025 alone, the number of American tourists visiting Europe decreased by over 35%. The countries that once rolled out the red carpet are now putting up cold doors. For many people, a trip to Europe is not just a vacation, and those are also family memories, a dream honeymoon, or a journey back to one's roots. But today, that dream is crumbling even if you have money and the world's most powerful passport. After all, what caused old friends to turn away? And why are the most popular American destinations the first to close? Today, we will explore 10 European countries that are moving away from American tourists and uncovering the truth behind the new barriers. From record-high visa fees to unprecedented strict regulations. A small note is that the video content is based on factual reports, news and reviews from various sources, and does not serve financial purposes or investment recommendations. If you think this only happens somewhere far away, just wait until you find out that the #1 country, which once considered the US its soulmate, is now shutting its doors to us. In just the first half of 2025, the number of American tourists visiting Hungary decreased by over 42%, an unprecedented freefall. From being the gateway to Eastern Europe welcoming the West, Hungary has now erected an invisible wall of paperwork, procedures, and new visa fees. Hungary was once a dream destination for many Americans, more affordable than Western Europe, picturesque landscapes along the Danube, and a Budapest as romantic as Paris. However, since 2025, that dream has become difficult to reach. The government is implementing record-high Schengen visa fees, accompanied by a more thorough review process for US citizens. Part of the reason stems from diplomatic disagreements surrounding the mutual visa regulations between the US and the European Union. As a result, many plans were disrupted. A couple in Texas plans to honeymoon in Budapest this spring. They booked tickets, scheduled their trip, but their visa application was repeatedly requested for additional information. The waiting time was excessively long, forcing them to cancel their trip. They shared, "We never thought getting a European visa would be this difficult." For them, Hungary suddenly went from being a dream to a sad blemish. The irony is that Hungary relies heavily on international tourism, especially from the US and UK markets. However, instead of trying to retain this group of customers, they seem to accept the decline. Some experts believe that Hungary is shifting its focus to welcoming guests from Asia and the Middle East, markets that are experiencing strong growth and require fewer special offers. This is not just a story about visa procedures, but also a change in national-level tourism strategy. For many Americans, this evokes a sense of loss that is difficult to describe. Not only is it a destination crossed off the list, but it's also a sign that the privileges of American citizenship, enjoyed for decades, seem to be gradually fading. If a country you love suddenly adds visa barriers, would you find a way to overcome them or quietly choose a different destination? And if you think Hungary is an isolated case, just wait for the next country, where a former resort paradise that was once a second home for Americans is now also coldly closing down. If Hungary is the closed door to Eastern Europe, then in the southwest, a sunny seaside paradise is also gently but decisively closing its doors. Portugal, a country that was once a bargain destination for Americans, is no longer an easy choice. Just a few years ago, the cobblestone streets of Lisbon were filled with the laughter and chatter of tourists from California, Texas, and New York. American retirees are flocking to the Algarve to spend their winters in warmer weather at a lower cost than back home. But come 2025, that picture changes. Portugal's new policy aligns with the pan-European ETIAS visa regulations, but the fee applied here is higher than the EU average. Not only that, but many Airbnbs and boutique hotels are starting to refuse American guest groups, citing the need to maintain quiet for the community, a phrase that local media delicately translates as concern about overly noisy guests. As a result, the number of American tourists has significantly decreased. Q1 2025 figures show a drop of approximately 28% in American tourists visiting Portugal compared to the same period last year. Behind this number are personal stories full of regret. A man living in Florida has spent nearly the past decade visiting the Algarve 4 times a year. He said, "Here, I feel like I'm home." But this year, new visa fees and warnings about the procedures led him to decide to cancel the entire itinerary. He said, "I don't want to have to pay hundreds of dollars extra and go through mountains of paperwork just to get to a place that once welcomed me with open arms." What surprised many Americans was that Portugal actively tried to attract American citizens to settle long-term just a few years ago, even offering golden visas to investors and retirees. And yet, now, this flow is reversed, turning a peaceful harbor into a financial and procedural challenge. For many older Americans, this is not just the loss of a tourist destination. It's also the loss of their winter home, a place that has been intertwined with their lifestyle, health, and even transatlantic friendships. If a place that was once familiar now pushes you away, would you try to hold on or quietly seek a new land? And if you think Portugal is just an exception in the Mediterranean, wait for the next country, where a historic capital that once smiled at American visitors is now more tight-lipped than ever. If Portugal was once the warm winter home of Americans, then Czechia, and especially Prague, was its vibrant summer garden. But by 2025, that garden will no longer be as open as before. From the ancient cobblestone streets of Old Town to the sun-drenched Charles Bridge, Prague was once dubbed the most American-friendly European capital. Just a few years ago, American English echoed throughout cafes and restaurants, with smiling tour guides greeting guests with, "Welcome, my friends from the US." But now, that is gradually disappearing. In 2025, the Czech Republic will implement an additional visa fee specifically for US citizens, alongside the new Schengen regulations. This makes the total cost of applying for a visa about 20 to 25% higher than the average applied by many EU countries. That's not all. Many incentives for US group tours, which were previously popular, have also been cut. As a result, the number of American tourists visiting the Czech Republic plummeted, dropping from the top 3 to the top 10 on the list of the most numerous tourist nationalities. A 68-year-old retired woman from Ohio has led her church group to Prague every summer for the past 7 years. But this year, new visa costs and complex procedures caused the plan to fall through. She shared, "Prague has always been a place where I feel safe and welcome. But this time, we felt like we weren't welcome anymore." The irony is that Prague actively courted American tourists after the COVID-19 travel crisis, even launching a special promotional campaign for the North American market. Now, where smiles once bloomed, lips are sealed, as if to say, we need to prioritize others first. This is not just a story about visa procedures, but seems to be a sign of a wave reshaping the tourism market spreading across Europe. And for those who once considered Prague the starting point for their Eastern European journey, this change leaves a difficult-to-fill void. If a city that was once dear to you, that welcomed you with a smile, now turns away coldly, will you find a way to return or accept leaving? And if you thought Prague was already heartbreaking, wait, next nation. A romantic Latin country where guitars once strummed under balconies, now playing a sad tune for American tourists. Spain. Sad guitar. From the red-tiled roofs of Prague, our journey takes us south, where the sound of flamenco guitar once echoed through the cobblestone streets of Seville. But in 2025, that tune seemed to slow down, become deeper and more distant from American visitors. For Americans, Spain is more than just a travel destination. It's the Mediterranean dream. A glass of chilled sangria by the Costa del Sol, afternoons wandering through Barcelona's squares, and Madrid nights filled with music. For many years, Spain has consistently been among the top 3 favorite destinations for American tourists in Europe. But as we enter 2025, that friendly image is being shrouded in a hazy mist of cumbersome procedures and escalating costs. Not only does Spain require the general EU ETS visa, but it also demands financial proof at a much higher level than many other countries, along with mandatory health insurance that comes at a significant cost. For many Americans, this is like a test before stepping foot in the land of Picasso and Gaudí. A family from Colorado spent over 3 months preparing their documents to obtain a visa for Spain. They were asked to prove their finances up to 3 times, submit additional insurance documents, and finally receive their visas only 1 week before their departure date. They shared, half jokingly, half frustrated, "We feel like we have to compete to earn the right to go on vacation." The irony is that Spain actively opened its doors to American tourists after the pandemic, launching a series of promotional campaigns and airline ticket discounts to bring visitors back. Now, policy and procedural changes have turned the gateway to the Mediterranean into a major barrier, especially for older travelers or multi-generational families. For many, the guitar music in Seville Square now sounds like a sad melody, beautiful and captivating. But listening from the outside, it's no longer easy to step into. If a place that once welcomed you with smiles and music now makes you go through many bureaucratic hurdles, would you still keep your plan to go there? And if you thought the Mediterranean was challenging enough, the next stop, where the melodious waltzes of the festival season are also echoing in a hall increasingly devoid of American tourists. Leaving behind the sad guitar music in Seville Square, we head north, crossing snow-capped mountains to reach Vienna, the capital of classical music. But this year, the legendary waltzes echoed through a hall devoid of Americans. Austria, and especially its capital Vienna, has always held a special place in the hearts of many American visitors. This is where they found the elegance of old Europe: winter concerts, antique cafes, and golden palaces shimmering under the nightlights. However, 2025 brought a quiet but noticeable change. The new ETS visa policy and restrictions on US tours during peak season have made it more difficult to visit Vienna. The organizers of the famous music festival here even limited the number of tickets sold to the American tour group, citing a priority for visitors from closer markets to reduce the strain on winter infrastructure. An elderly woman in Chicago who had dreamed for years of attending the New Year's Eve concert in Vienna. But this year, she couldn't book tickets, not because they were sold out, but because the allocation for the American tour group had been reduced by more than half. The irony is that Americans were once VIP guests of the Vienna festival seasons, high spenders, art lovers, and frequent returnees. But today, they have become the group that must stand outside, looking through the wooden doors of the Grand Theatre, listening to the blue Danube echoing from afar. For those who love classical music, this is not just a missed trip. It's a piece of cultural memory that's been severed, a memory of glittering European winters, when American footsteps still echoed evenly through the snow-covered streets of Vienna. If a lifelong dream suddenly seems out of reach due to a new policy, would you find a way to overcome it? Or would you choose to keep it as an unfulfilled dream? And if you thought Vienna was enough to make your heart skip a beat, in the next country where giant wind turbines in Northern Europe are closing down and the same bustling Amsterdam is now cautious with American tourists. Leaving the quiet concert halls of Vienna behind, we head north to a place where giant windmills once welcomed millions of visitors each year. But by 2025, those windmills seem to slow down, and Amsterdam, Europe's most vibrant capital, gently closed its doors to Americans. The Netherlands has always been one of the favorite destinations for American tourists, not just because of the beauty of the Amsterdam canals, the vibrant tulip festivals, or the world-class art museums, but also because of the free and open atmosphere. For over a decade, Americans visiting the Netherlands have often felt as free as at home. But by 2025, that freedom will come with many new barriers. The Amsterdam city government has begun restricting large tour groups from the US, imposing strict limits on the number of Airbnb permits for international guests, especially those from distant markets like North America. The official goal is to protect the city's identity and reduce the pressure of over-tourism. But the consequence is a decrease of up to 50% in American visitors compared to 2023. What surprised many Americans was that Amsterdam, known as the most liberal city in Europe, is now among the most restrictive cities for tourism. Neighborhoods once bustling with American tourists are now deserted, and for many, this emptiness no longer holds a romantic charm, but is a sign of a door slowly closing. For American tourists, this is not just about losing a free-spirited destination. It's like seeing a long-time open friend start to distance themselves. If a city that once allowed you to roam freely now imposes a series of additional restrictions, would you find a way to adapt or seek out another city to fulfill your dream trip? Italy, with Rome, Florence, and Venice, has long been the lifelong dream of millions of Americans. Strolling under the arches of the Colosseum, enjoying gelato in a Florentine piazza, or drifting along the canals of Venice in a gondola, all of these were once considered once-in-a-lifetime experiences. But as we enter 2025, that dream becomes more elusive than ever. In addition to the general EU ETS visa requirement, Italy has increased visa fees and tightened security checks for US citizens. Some major airports, particularly Fiumicino in Rome and Malpensa in Milan, have implemented a fast-track interview process at immigration for travelers from the United States, requiring clear proof of the purpose of their trip, itinerary, and financial means. The irony is that Italy is still heavily promoting itself to attract international tourists after the pandemic. But in parallel, they also created invisible barriers that made the American customer group, a major source of revenue, feel less prioritized. Some travel experts believe that Italy is trying to control the number of tourists to protect its heritage and infrastructure, but is inadvertently sending a cold message. We don't need you to come too much. For many Americans, this is not just a bureaucratic hurdle. It's the feeling of losing your welcome in a country once considered the most romantic destination in the world. If your Roman dream was suddenly shrouded in procedures and scrutinizing gazes, would you still pursue it? Or would you let it remain an unfinished dream? And if you thought Italy was surprising enough, just wait for the next country, where the glamorous Paris, the city of love, is also drawing the curtains and replacing welcoming kisses with a suspicious gaze. From the closed Roman gates in Italy, the journey takes us north, where golden domes, the Champs-Élysées, and the Eiffel Tower once welcomed American visitors with smiles and glasses of wine. But in 2025, the city of love is drawing the curtain on its tears. Paris. Just the name alone evokes so many dreams for Americans. Whether it's a honeymoon, a wedding anniversary, or a first trip to Europe, Paris is always at the top of the list of dream destinations. But come 2025, the journey here will no longer be a matter of just buying a plane ticket and packing your bags. In addition to the EU-wide ETS visa requirement, France has additional regulations requiring US travelers to provide a detailed daily itinerary, along with proof of accommodation and financial means, before a visa is issued. And right at the Charles de Gaulle airport border crossing, many American passengers are having to go through hours-long screening processes, something that was rare just a few years ago. What makes this surprise so profound is that just 5 to 7 years ago, Paris launched a series of campaigns to encourage American tourists to return after the terrorist attacks and the pandemic. At that time, American tourists were considered the saviors of the French tourism industry, and yet, today, they are the very group that faces the most barriers. For many Americans, the moment of seeing the Eiffel Tower sparkling in the distance is now mixed with a feeling of not being as welcome as before. And that's the biggest sadness. Not for losing a destination, but for losing a sense of belonging in what was once considered the city of love. If Paris, which once welcomed you with open arms, now forces you to wait for hours to prove your reason for being, will you still feel the same love for this city? And if you thought the shock in Paris was deep enough, in the next country, where a major US economic and political partner is also erecting an invisible wall, making your trip there more luxurious and difficult than ever before. From the glamorous streets of Paris, we're just a few hours away by high-speed train to Berlin, the economic heart of Europe, which beat in sync with the United States for decades. But in 2025, a new wall is rising here, not made of concrete and steel, but of procedures, costs, and wary eyes. For many Americans, Germany is more than just a tourist destination. This is a symbol of a strong alliance, of business trips, international conferences, and also a gateway to exploring all of Europe. But in 2025, the image of a welcoming Germany is fading. In addition to the ETS visa, Germany has doubled the visa fees for US citizens compared to before. This is accompanied by security and interview procedures at some international airports such as Frankfurt or Munich, where American passengers may be asked to provide a detailed explanation of their itinerary and purpose of travel. What confuses many Americans is that Germany still needs international visitors to sustain its service, conference, and exhibition industries. However, the current policy makes the American customer group, a major consumer market, one of the most costly and time-consuming groups to prepare for. For many older travelers, this is like rebuilding an invisible Berlin Wall between the two shores of the Atlantic Ocean. The consequences don't stop at tourism. Some small American businesses that rely on German trade shows have had to cut back on their trips due to rising costs and procedures. This quietly undermines the economic and cultural connections that have been nurtured over decades. For American tourists who once considered Berlin an open city, accessible at any time, the feeling now is one of both regret and a bit of betrayal. If a close ally also starts putting up barriers in front of you, would you try to overcome them or seek a new friend? And if you thought Germany was the final frontier of surprise, get ready for the story in the next country. A nation once called America's special friend, but now the most demanding, shocking, and bewildering for American visitors in 2025. From the invisible walls in Germany, we only need to cross the English Channel to reach the United Kingdom, America's closest friend and most special partner for generations. But in 2025, that friend closed the door. If there's any European country that Americans consider a second home, it's England. Common language, shared history, and millions of visits back and forth each year. This relationship was once called the special relationship. From American students studying abroad at Oxford and business trips to London, to family vacations in the Cotswolds countryside, everything used to feel so natural. But by 2025, the UK had implemented a new ETA system for American visitors, requiring registration at least 3 days in advance and charging fees over 80% higher than those in place just 2 years prior. Not only that, but some airlines have refused to allow American passengers to board if they do not present a valid ETA, even if they are only transiting through the UK. The irony is that just a few years ago, the British government hailed its relationship with the US as unshakable. They encourage American tourists and investors to visit, viewing this as an uninterrupted flow. But the new policy created an unprecedented barrier, and it wasn't just administrative procedure. It was a psychological sign that even special friends were distancing themselves. For many Americans, this is not just a travel change. It is a symbol of the reversal of fortune, a reminder that the world has changed and privileges once considered permanent are now just memories. If even your closest friend can turn their back on you, is there anywhere else in the world where American citizens are welcomed as they once were? 10 countries, 10 stories. But ultimately, this isn't just about visas or cost. It's a reminder that the world is changing, and the position of American citizens on the international map is also shifting. Once considered a golden ticket to go anywhere, passports have now become a piece of paper that must pass through more checkpoints. Perhaps these changes stem from the need to manage tourism, protect heritage, or adjust diplomatic relations. But for each visitor, it means more careful planning, more preparation, and sometimes having to say goodbye to a destination they've been connected to for many years. What about you? If your favorite country builds more barriers, would you find a way to overcome them or choose another place? Please share your story, opinion, or experience in the comments section. This is a conversation we'd love to hear your input on. If you want to continue joining us on journeys of exploration, analysis, and reflection on global life, economy sa aynasi, fimain chamsi, jami sa aime chomri sorositi, please click subscribe and turn on notifications. That's the best way for you not to miss any new stories. This video is based on publicly available sources, tourism figures, and visa policies published up to 2025. This is not legal advice, travel guidance, or a political statement. Policies can change quickly, so always check official information before planning your trip.